Well, let's get right into the. Let's talk some about the album. So, Spotify is surveillance. Is that the truth?
It is sadly the truth, and what's wild is I actually titled the album this before we found out about that really creepy patent that Spotify filed to literally use voice recognition surveillance to recommend music to you based on your private conversations. So that is a real thing, and we can talk about that in a second. But I actually decided to title the album it before that because even without listening to you directly, Spotify basically has the same business model as YouTube and Facebook and Instagram, where they're essentially harvesting our data, using it to infer things about us, and then using that to better recommend advertising. So it was sort of a commentary just on the encroachment of surveillance capitalism into music and art, which I think is, really concerning. Obviously we know that business model is really harmful to the political sphere, harmful to democracy, but it creeps me out to think about a future where like music, like this thing that I feel like, at least to me, is kind of sacred, is increasingly, being created to please some cold-hearted algorithm instead of like for what it's always been for, which is like, human connection, right? So yeah, that's where the title comes from.
So is the album actually on Spotify, or are you completely blacklisted?
The album is on Spotify, and and some folks have asked me about that, like why? And the short answer is, for me, calling the album Spotify surveillance is not a way to shame people for using Spotify. I mean, here we are on YouTube,
Sure.
which is a platform where you've been able to build a platform to reach a lot of people and share a lot of important information. And I think we all know that as activists and truth tellers, we need every tool in the toolbox. And so I wouldn't want to, keep these songs off of a platform that's going to make them accessible to more people. Because again, this isn't about individual consumer choices or my choice as an artist, whether or not to have my music on Spotify. These are about collective choices and collective action. And so Spotify surveillance and the associated campaign that we launched with it is very much about collectively demanding better from the platforms that are out there, rather than just sort of being like, well, I'm too cool for Spotify, so screw all of you. That doesn't actually change anything. It just makes you feel punk. And I'm punk enough. I don't have to feel that way.
Well, yeah, and plus, I kind of really appreciated, I mean, and I'm sure you remember this when it happened. In fact, I think you and I talked about this briefly, but when, we all know that Spotify screws over artists royally. I mean, I get some of it because my stand-up album is on Spotify. So I feel some of it too, but musicians really, really feel it. And, the CEO of Spotify just said, hey, just make more music. I'm still going to screw you over, but if you make more of it, then, there's more songs for me to screw you over on, but the fractions of pennies will add up. So you say, okay, I got a new album out. It's called Spotify is Surveillance. Enjoy it. Put it in your ear holes.
Yeah, there it is. And yeah, it's funny where you mentioned at the beginning, I mean, the album is, it charted a little bit on Billboard and it got some love from Rolling Stone and Pitchfork and whatever. Zero Spotify editorial playlists so far. So I wear that as a badge of honor.
Well, that's awesome that you were able to break through regardless, because, it's a great album. I enjoy it. And I want to talk a little about some of the specific stuff that hit me in particularly hard. The opening track really got me, back row. And I mean, first of all, I like the fact that, it is a full band album, that like there's guitar, bass, drums. It's not just a stripped down folk album.
It's really like just me and Darcy, the garage band drummer. I'm not going to lie. Mostly. Yeah. I play some of the drums, but yeah.
Oh, right on. But like, it opens with just a slightly distorted guitar, and then, you come in with vocals. And I liked how that song, there's a certain nostalgia about it. And I think, you and I think we're pretty much the same age. So, I mean, maybe you still grapple with this and I know I do, where we are still every now and again, I wake up in the morning and I realize that you and I there's a generation below us now. You know what I mean? Like we're not part of the newest generation anymore. We are slightly elders. We're in the middle. We're the millennial, like we're in between. And there is a certain nostalgia for those basement shows. And, as I was listening to it, I really did. I was taken to a basement in Bloomington, Indiana while I was listening to it and expressing the slight regret of, every time I was in the back playing on my phone instead of really just being in the moment. So I kind of got this vibe that it was not only just a sort of coming of age song, but also kind of reflecting on what's going on now in the pandemic, where you really have a lot of time to get in your head about that stuff because, live performance is something that is missing that, while the Zoom shows have helped and in my opinion are better than nothing at all of us, musicians, poets, comedians, audience members, everyone, a part of us is just missing at the moment, and it hurts. Was that kind of what you were going for? Or?
Yeah, totally. I mean, the song just sort of poured out of me one night. And yeah, it almost actually stemmed from like a joke, like something I just like quipped to my partner where I was like, I would pay $500 to go to the worst punk show ever. Like one of those shows where people are like wasted and like barfing on you. And there's a bunch of like misogynist dudes like elbowing you and like the bands suck. Like, and I would love like like it's been that long of quarantine that like I would die to like go to that show, And so, yeah, it just was sort of, I wanted to capture like, it is totally like, it's like weaponized nostalgia, I mean, it's like, and I definitely was going for that, but I also wanted to capture like nostalgia for like the imperfection. Like so many, like those basement shows weren't always fun. Like sometimes they really sucked and were really boring. Or really like problematic or really like, traumatic in some moments or et cetera. But I think, but they were real and they were human. And when so much of our human interaction now is sort of mediated through screens, which, can also be real and human in other ways, but just like missing some of those like very I kind of describe like smells and touches in the song, like that, like smelling beer on a microphone or like the duct tape or like the Christmas lights. And so like, yeah, there was something about that, like realness of physical space that just feels so missing right now. And that like, yeah. And almost like the desire to go back to that imperfection where like, you don't know what to expect, right? Like you watch a live stream and in a way you sort of know what to expect. Or even a lot of stuff now is like pre-recorded, which, is better for audio and certainly better for a lot of musicians and works for me. Like I was like chilling with my partner the other night watching Law and Order and I was like, oh, I'm playing a show right now because it was a pre-recorded video. But yeah, I miss that, just that feeling of being together with other people. I wanted to say just one thing because I was watching the chat and I saw someone ask about Bandcamp and SoundCloud in relation to some of the Spotify stuff. And I will just say, I have absolutely nothing bad to say about Bandcamp. Bandcamp is pretty awesome. And they're very transparent with how they pay artists and their business model is not based on harvesting your data. I know less about SoundCloud. They certainly are an ad-based platform, so probably do have some similar issues. I do think Spotify has kind of set themselves apart and certainly have become such a dominant player in the music industry. And I think that's why they are increasingly under fire, both from artists and now from digital rights and privacy activists.
Yeah, and Bandcamp also, they do a lot of things, especially during the pandemic, where they've kind of given the artist the full share on certain days to just try to help out. So yeah, I've always heard that Bandcamp is among the better actors, in the space right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, again, there's nothing wrong with like creating platforms where artists can like, creating services, right? Like I could build my own, store on my site and make it so that you could buy my album through that or whatever. But like, that's a lot of work and I don't really want to do that. I want to write punk songs and like try and save the internet. So I'm very happy to, give them whatever cut it is that they take when you buy one of my albums from them. Again, because it's very transparent. They're very clear. Here's the percent that goes to us. Here's the percent that goes to you, and you can set, sliding scale pricing, et cetera. Whereas Spotify is, they have these secret deals with big record labels where we don't even know, when you stream music on Spotify or you pay your monthly Spotify subscription, it's not like, if you only listen to Evan Greer and Bruce Springsteen, all the money goes to me and Bruce Springsteen. Some portion of that money goes to like EMI because some other people are streaming the Beatles or whatever, right? So it's not clear or transparent how artists actually get paid. And that's one of the demands of the Union of Musicians and Allied Workers who've been running the Justice at Spotify campaign. And one breakthrough there is that Apple at least started using their rhetoric. Apple's now saying that they do pay on average a penny per stream, which is what the Union of Musicians and Allied Workers have been calling on Spotify to do. We want to see the proof there from Apple, but it is a big sign that these companies are feeling the heat. They're feeling the pressure. And if artists and creators keep organizing, we can demand better. And again, none of this is about beating up on the internet. Ron, I love the internet, and I think the internet is awesome for independent musicians and artists and creators. But it's about fighting for, fair compensation for our labor and fighting for access. The internet should be a place where everyone has access, not walled gardens where, only those who can pay have access. There are ways to make sure that everyone gets fairly paid and everyone has access to, the universal library of human knowledge and creativity, which is what it should be.
Well, I think it also goes into kind of the Nicholas Carr message of the technology is not going anywhere, and to keep it with the artists, right now that there's some comedians who they won't do Zoom shows because it's not true to the craft, and they won't do this, and my response has always been like, hey, remember 10, 15 years ago when there were some comedians who wouldn't get on social media because they thought that wasn't true to the craft? Do you remember them? No? Yeah, yep. Nobody else does either. That's the issue. So, it's one of those things. The technology is here. And, as we've spoken about on this show and over at Fight for the Future, the technology is a very, very useful tool. However, there are concerns that come along with these technological advancements, and it's up to digital rights organizations to really kind of hold the powers that be accountable. I mean, that's really what y'all do. Like that is what y'all do. And I think so many people don't realize the danger we would be in if it wasn't for organizations like Fight for the Future and all the other digital rights organizations out there.
Oh, well, thanks. Yeah. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there, though, Ron, because in the end, it's like very few technologies are like inherently good or bad. And I think there are a few, right? Like, Fight for the Future has called for an outright ban on facial recognition surveillance. That's a technology that we think, no matter what, is like so inherently harmful and dangerous and discriminatory that like it just should not be used. It should be abolished, period. Short of that, the vast majority of technology is not good or bad. It's all about who has power, right? And it's about making sure that power is in the hands of people rather than, corporations or elite institutions or politicians or governments. And it's about fighting to ensure that we have policies around technology that make sure that we keep power in the hands of the people. And so I think that's just so important because, again, there is, and we see this come up in various different ways. Like you said, we certainly have seen it from the music industry where big record labels and big content creators or content owners, rather, like Disney, have pushed really hard on this idea that like the internet is bad and it's exploiting artists. And we see it come up also in politics where increasingly, both Democrats and Republicans are kind of on this line of like, the internet is bad or, it's full of disinformation. And, there's real problems there to look at. I would argue most of them are related to companies like Facebook and Google's business models rather than the content itself. But there's an underlying piece of that that's also just about elites being scared of the fact that like people like you and I now have a bit of a voice and a platform. And, like they are made uncomfortable by the fact that like the rabble now have a bit of a megaphone, and it sort of upends these traditional gatekeepers in ways that can be both good and bad. But if we accept that the status quo where CNN and Fox News got to define reality for decades was also pretty terrible, I'm willing to like ride the rocky seas of the internet for a little bit and see where it leads us, you know?
Oh, absolutely. So let's get back to the album, because this was another specific album question. What made you decide to close with the John Prine cover?
I mean, I love John Prine.
Yeah.
I think he's one of the greatest songwriters that ever lived. And I recorded the guitar and vocals and drums for that the night that he died, which was kind of early in the pandemic. And, I guess he was sort of like one of the first like celebrities or whatever who died from COVID, who like I had like a personal connection to, not personal, like he knew me, but like just who really mattered to me, and was a big influence on me. And then, I think you probably know also my dear friend and longtime mentor and touring partner, Ann Feeney, passed away, also of COVID. And so in a way, I not wrote it, but I laid down the recording of it as sort of a tribute for John. But it kind of became symbolic to me of like just a way of paying tribute to the folks that we've lost and like beginning the process of mourning that I think we haven't even, the last like year and a half have just been like one collective trauma after another. There hasn't even been space to just like be sad. And so, yeah, but I also think that song like does really sort of capture like the I don't know, the like kind of like time warp that has been the pandemic, right? That like final verse of like, how the hell can someone go to work in the morning, come home in the evening and have nothing to say? And like, I just think, there's something about that song that has always moved me, but it just felt like the right song for the moment. And rest in power, John Prine.
Yeah, absolutely. Ann Feeney. Yeah. I never got to meet Ann Feeney, but it's one of those things, especially growing up in Pittsburgh, where
I always forget you're a Pittsburgh. Yeah, okay.
I grew up there, so I always heard about her, and she was just one of those names you'd always hear about, and you really respected what she did. And I never got to cross paths with her in person, but when I saw that, I was just like, oh wow. And then I have a lot of friends who were very close with her, and it's been quite a time. It's been quite a time for the world at large.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and